It was a sunny morning in May 2025 in Ouagadougou when Ibrahim Traoré got a phone call from his helper, Dr. Alonso Ouedraogo. "Mr. President, we got a cool invitation from America. The White House wants you to talk about schools with Karoline Leavitt, the new person who talks to reporters." Ibrahim stopped reading his school reports. He knew Karoline was a young, tough politician who said mean things about leaders from other countries. "What kind of talk is it?" Ibrahim asked, wondering why. They wanted him there. "A live TV show that everyone around the world can watch. CNN will be in charge. They want to talk about making schools better in our time," Dr. Ouedraogo explained. "They want to see how American schools and African schools are different." Ibrahim smiled a little. At 35 years old, he had made Burkina Faso's schools way better, and important groups around the world were impressed. "Let's do it. This will be a chance to show the world what Africa can teach about schools." In Washington, D.C., Karoline Leavitt sat in her White House office looking at notes about Burkina Faso. "This young president thinks he can teach us about schools," she told her workers. "I'm going to show the world that he's just a poor country leader trying to sound important." Her helper, Emily Rodriguez, showed her Burkina Faso's school numbers. "Karoline, Burkina Faso's reading and school finishing numbers have gone up a lot. Maybe you should be nicer to him." "Emily, you don't understand world politics," Karoline said, shaking her head. "These African leaders make up big numbers to sound good. My job is to show everyone the truth." The TV show was planned for Thursday. Two totally different ideas about schools were getting ready for a big fight that no one saw coming. In the days before the TV show, Ibrahim Traoré worked really hard to get ready. In his office at the president's house, he met with Aminata Compaoré, the person in charge of schools, to look at all the good things they had done since he became president. "I want all our facts to be checked and correct," Ibrahim said. "Karoline, Leavitt is known for saying that information is fake when it makes Western countries look bad." Aminata showed him amazing numbers. Reading ability went up from 29% to 78% in 3 years. We built 2,047 new schools. We put computers in 95% of schools. We made 23 new colleges for jobs. The results are incredible, Mr. President. Ibrahim nodded, but he knew that numbers alone wouldn't be enough. "We need real examples. I want stories of students who got better, teachers who changed, and towns that got richer because of education." Meanwhile, in Washington, Karoline Leavitt was doing her research with a totally different goal. "I want information about school problems and people who can't read. Anything that shows this African kid doesn't know what he's talking about," she told her research team. "A country that barely has electricity can't teach America about schools," her helper Michael Thompson warned her. "Karoline, be careful. Ibrahim Traoré has awards from UNESCO and Harvard for making schools better. Attacking him without good reasons could hurt you." "Michael, trust me," Karoline said proudly. "I've beaten arguments from politicians way smarter than this African guy." At CNN headquarters, Anderson Cooper was getting ready with questions that would make the TV show exciting. "We want real debate," he told his workers. "Real smart fighting, not fake politeness." The stage was set for one of the most explosive school debates in American TV history. The evening of May 22nd, 2025, came with people all over the world waiting to watch. At CNN's Atlanta studios, workers were making final changes, while Ibrahim Traoré connected by satellite from Ouagadougou and tested his connection. From the Washington studio, Karoline Leavitt fixed her blue jacket, confident that this would be an easy win. "Good evening, world," Anderson Cooper began. "Tonight we have an interesting debate between President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt about changing schools around the world." The screen split to show Ibrahim in his president's office with books and the Burkina Faso flag behind him, and Karoline in the fancy Washington studio. "President Traoré," Anderson began, "Karoline has been saying that rich countries like the United States should lead changes in schools around the world. What do you think?" Ibrahim smiled politely. "Mr. Cooper, I respect American knowledge about schools, but new ideas don't belong to any one country. Sometimes the best solutions come from places you don't expect." Karoline interrupted with obvious Sarcasm. President Traoré, with all respect, you lead a country where half the people couldn't read just a few years ago. How can you teach about schools to a nation that created Harvard, MIT, and Stanford? Ms. Leavitt, Ibrahim replied calmly, it's exactly because we have faced bigger challenges that we have come up with more creative solutions. When you don't have much money, you have to be smarter, not just richer. Karoline shook her head in a mean way. Smart? Where exactly did you go to school? Which American university did you go to? Because honestly, it seems like you learned from fighting manuals. The comment was meant to be hurtful and unfair. Ibrahim paused, staying calm, but Anderson Cooper could hear the tension getting worse. Miss Leavitt, that was unnecessary, Anderson said. Unnecessary but true, Karoline replied. We can't pretend that African education is the same as American education. Ibrahim finally spoke. Thank you for that example, Mrs. Leavitt. Now I know exactly what kind of education you represent. Ibrahim Traoré took a deep breath and looked right into the camera. His calmness was very different from Karoline's meanness. Ms. Leavitt, since you questioned my education, let me clear up a few things that your research apparently didn't find. Diplomas and certificates flashed across the screen. Bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Kwame Nkrumah, University of Science and Technology, Ghana. First-class master's degree in public administration from the Sorbonne, Paris. Full scholarship for being really smart MBA from the London School of Economics. Finished while working as a military officer. Karoline began to look uncomfortable. But Ibrahim wasn't finished. I also speak French, English, Portuguese, Arabic, and 4 local African languages perfectly. How many languages do you speak, Ms. Leavitt? That's not the point, Karoline said, stumbling over her words. The point is, if education matters. You're right, Ibrahim agreed. So let's talk about mattering. You mentioned Harvard, MIT, and Stanford. Fancy schools that, interestingly enough, are now studying our school methods. Official papers appeared on the screen. Harvard Business School has just made a study program about our country school methods. MIT is using our engineering teaching methods that work with little money. Stanford wants to work with us to study our way of teaching everyone with computers. Karoline tried to interrupt, but Ibrahim kept going steadily. Do you know why these American universities want to learn from us? Because we changed a country with a 29% reading rate into an African leader in science and math education in 3 years, something no American state has been able to do. These numbers are fake, Karoline said desperately. They are checked by UNESCO, the World Bank, and interestingly, the American Department of Education, Ibrahim said calmly. Your own government says our school skills are real. Anderson Cooper leaned forward, fascinated by how the debate was going. President Traoré, can you tell us more about these methods that impressed American schools? Of course. Ibrahim smiled. Starting with the most important thing. We teach our students to respect knowledge no matter where it comes from. Apparently a revolutionary idea for some people. Ibrahim Traoré decided to show Karoline's lack of knowledge even more. Miss Leavitt, since you value American school credentials so much, you might be interested to know that I'm a visiting professor at 3 American universities. Karoline's face turned visibly pale. That's impossible. University of California, Berkeley, where I teach new ways of governing, Columbia University, where I teach sustainable development, and Georgetown, where I give talks on youth leadership, Ibrahim said calmly. I can give you phone numbers for the deans if you want to check. Anderson Cooper was clearly impressed. That's extraordinary, President Traoré. Even more extraordinary, Ibrahim continued, is that these lectures are always packed. American students want to learn about how we changed education with a budget, 50 times smaller than any American state. Karoline tried one last desperate move. But you still lead a poor country. How can you talk about school success? Ibrahim smiled for the first time with real amusement. Ms. Leavitt, Burkina Faso may not have much money, but our students consistently do better than Americans in international math, science, and computer competitions. Results from academic competitions flashed on the screen. Last year, our students won 47 medals in international competitions. Our 16-year-old computer programmers create apps that American companies buy for millions of dollars. Furthermore, Ibrahim continued, our college graduation rate is 94%. What is the American rate, Miss Leavitt? Karoline stayed silent, knowing that the American rate was much lower. 73%, Ibrahim said, answering his own question. Our poorly educated students graduate from college more often than Americans. But most importantly, Ibrahim concluded, we teach our young people that intelligence has no color, nationality, or money status. That respecting knowledge is essential for growth. Lessons that apparently some people have yet to learn. The silence in the studio was deafening. Karoline had been completely destroyed. Karoline Leavitt was visibly shocked. Her initial meanness was completely broken by Ibrahim's careful response. I wasn't questioning African intelligence in general, she said, trying to recover. I was just... What exactly, Ms. Leavitt? Ibrahim interrupted softly. Questioning my skills based on wrong ideas about African education, assuming that American universities are automatically better? Anderson Cooper watched in fascination as Karoline struggled to form a good response. President Traoré, you have clearly prepared a lot for this show. Indeed. I needed no special preparation, Ibrahim replied. These are simply results of our daily work. Ms. Leavitt apparently did not do her homework before making judgments. Karoline tried to change the subject. But let's be realistic about school resources. The United States spends billions on education, and yet, Ibrahim interrupted her, its students lag behind countries with much smaller budgets in international rankings. Maybe the problem isn't money, but approach. Global education rankings appeared on the screen showing American decline in science and math. Burkina Faso has risen 47 places in education rankings in the last 3 years. The United States has fallen 12 places in the same period. Karoline was now visibly annoyed. You're twisting statistics. I'm quoting data from the U.S. Department of Education itself, Ibrahim said calmly. If you consider that twisting, perhaps you should question your own methods of collecting information. Besides, Ibrahim continued, our teachers earn good wages compared to local living costs. They can focus on teaching instead of working 3 jobs to survive. Seemingly revolutionary concept. Anderson Cooper asked a question that Karoline clearly wasn't expecting. Miss Leavitt, how do you respond to these points about school efficiency? She stayed silent for several seconds before whispering, we would need to analyze this data in more detail. Of course, Ibrahim said gently. Careful analysis is always wise before making public judgments. Karoline Leavitt's awkward silence echoed around the studio as Ibrahim Traoré patiently waited for her next response. Anderson Cooper, sensing the need to keep the show moving, asked another question. President Traoré, what advice would you give to school systems struggling with limited resources? Ibrahim looked directly at Karoline before answering. The first piece of advice is to never underestimate the ability for new ideas when resources are limited. Need forces creativity in ways that having plenty never can. Our teachers developed teaching methods using cell phones when we didn't have computers. They created science labs with recycled materials when we couldn't afford expensive equipment. These solutions are now being studied by wealthy universities, Karoline finally tried to answer. But surely you agree that having enough resources improves school quality. Of course, Ibrahim agreed. But resources without vision are wasted. Vision without resources forces innovation. The ideal combination is to have both, but if I have to choose, I prefer vision. Ms. Leavitt, Ibrahim continued, your initial question about where I went to school reveals something important, a tendency to measure skills by school fame rather than actual results. Anderson Cooper leaned forward. Can you explain that more? Gladly. Ibrahim replied. Harvard is great because it produces results, not because it has a famous name. If a country school in Burkina Faso produces better engineers than Harvard, then it deserves respect. Fame should follow performance, not come before it. Karoline attempted a weak defense. But tradition and reputation matter in education. They matter in keeping the same old ways, Ibrahim said. Innovation comes from questioning traditions, not blindly worshiping them. Our students learn to think critically about everything, including educational authority. That's why, Ibrahim concluded, they ask questions that bother people, propose solutions that surprise, and achieve results that defy expectations. Real education should produce independent thinkers, not fame repeaters. The contrast between Ibrahim's wisdom and Karoline's empty arrogance was becoming painfully obvious to millions of viewers. Ibrahim Traoré decided to make his most devastating observation yet. "Miss Leavitt, there is something I should share that might explain our conversation today." Karoline looked nervously, sensing another embarrassing revelation. "Last month, I was invited to speak at the annual Conference of American Presidents on Educational Innovation in Resource-Constrained Settings. Do you know who organized the event?" Anderson Cooper was visibly curious. "Who organized it, President Traoré?" "The United States Department of Education," Ibrahim said calmly. "Apparently, they value our educational expertise more than their own press secretary." Karoline was visibly embarrassed. That can't be right." "I can provide you with a confirmation email from Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona if you'd like," Ibrahim offered. "He specifically mentioned interest in our fast reading methods and country science education." "More interesting still," Ibrahim continued, 3 American universities have requested permission to send groups to study our methods on site, including one you mentioned, MIT. Official letters from the universities appeared on the screen. MIT wants to understand how we teach advanced engineering using minimal resources. Harvard is interested in our youth leadership programs. Stanford wants to copy our inclusive digital education model. Karoline tried desperately. "But that doesn't mean you're superior." "I never said we're superior," Ibrahim corrected gently. "I said we're different, that we face unique challenges, that have developed unique solutions, that valuable knowledge can come from anywhere. True educational superiority," Ibrahim concluded, "would be to recognize that learning is a two-way process. America can teach us a lot. We can teach something too. Arrogance prevents both sides from growing." Anderson Cooper shook his head in admiration. "President Traoré, that is a remarkably mature perspective on international educational cooperation." "It is a necessary perspective," Ibrahim replied. "In the 21st century, no country can afford to ignore useful knowledge regardless of where it comes from geographically." Having been completely intellectually dismantled, Karoline Leavitt was silent for long moments. Anderson Cooper was about to close the show when she finally spoke, her voice noticeably different. "President Traoré, I must apologize." Ibrahim looked surprised for the first time that evening. "It is not necessary, Ms. Leavitt." "Yes, it is necessary," Karoline insisted, clearly struggling with her own humility. "I came to this show with terrible wrong ideas about African education. I assumed that American knowledge was automatically superior. I was completely wrong." Anderson Cooper watched this unexpected turn of events with fascination. "What changed your perspective, Miss Leavitt?" "Every fact President Traoré presented shattered my assumptions," Karoline said honestly. "I cannot argue with real results. I cannot pretend that my ignorance was justified." Ibrahim leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Miss Leavitt, admitting error takes courage. That is admirable courage." Karoline laughed bitterly. "This is a well-deserved humiliation. I represent the American government and I have shown complete ignorance of significant educational innovations. But now you know," Ibrahim said gently. "Knowledge is a process. No one is born knowing everything." Karoline took a deep breath. "President Traoré, I would like to make a formal request on behalf of the American government. I invite you to present Burkina Faso educational methods to our state secretaries of education." Anderson Cooper was clearly impressed. "That is extraordinary, Miss Leavitt. It is necessary," she replied. "If Burkina Faso has developed solutions that American universities want to study, our policymakers need to learn as well." Ibrahim smiled, genuinely for the first time. "It would be an honor to share our experiences, Ms. Leavitt. Education improves when we share knowledge rather than defend it." "There is more," Karoline said. "I would like to propose an exchange program between American and Burkina Faso educators. Real Two-way learning. Now you are speaking like a true educator, Ibrahim replied, clearly pleased with Karoline's transformation. 6 months after the show that shocked the education world, the effects were still spreading globally. Karoline Leavitt was in Ouagadougou, leading the third American group of educators to study Burkina Faso methods. "I never imagined I would be here learning about education," she said in an interview with CNN. "But this country has lessons that the whole world needs to hear." The exchange program had become an international model. 23 countries have requested similar programs, Dr. Ouedraogo told Ibrahim. Burkina Faso has become a global benchmark for educational innovation. Ibrahim was in his office reviewing proposals for partnerships when Aminata Compaoré walked in with some impressive statistics. "Sir, we have received 847 requests from international universities to study our methods. Our educational influence has grown 500% since the show. The most important thing," Ibrahim said, "is that we are proving that educational cooperation benefits everyone. America is improving its country methods using our techniques. We are advancing our research with American technology." Karoline had become a fierce advocate for African education. "My initial ignorance was embarrassing," she said in a speech at Harvard, "but it taught me that arrogance is the greatest barrier to learning." The impact spread beyond education. Other sectors in the United States began to question assumptions about African capabilities. A political analyst said Ibrahim opened doors for genuine cooperation. One quiet evening, Ibrahim walked through the palace gardens with Aminata. "You changed global perceptions about African education," she said. "I didn't change perceptions," Ibrahim corrected. "I just showed a reality that already existed, a world people were willing to see." "And Karoline?" Aminata asked. "She proved something important, that intelligent people can acknowledge mistakes and grow. That is more valuable than never making mistakes." A year later, Karoline published a book, Lessons from Burkina Faso: How Humility Transformed My Educational Vision. It became an international bestseller. "Ibrahim Traoré taught me that true education begins with acknowledging what we don't know," she wrote in the dedication. "Your response not only defended your country, it educated the world."